I take this opportunity to invite our first speaker of the day, who, like I said, actually needs no introduction. One of the pioneering crusaders against this war on misinformation and disinformation, somebody who abandoned his cushy job as a software engineer in the US to initiate one of the first most credible fact-checking platforms in India. Yes, I'm talking about the co-founder and editor of Alt News. Over to you, Mr. Pratik Sinha. The stage is all yours. Please unmute yourself.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that kind introduction, Ghazala. And I'm glad to be on this forum, especially because it's an educational forum, and that is something that we have started looking at as an organization. That's what we've been looking at for the past almost more than a year now. And I went to the GMEC website, and in a question of why GMEC, it says that there's a widespread belief that much of the existing media education is not adequate. And I completely agree with this view that the media general, the education that we have in this country, especially when it comes to media and information, is not adequate. And that is one of the primary reasons why we stand today, where political parties and certain organizations are using misinformation in an absolute organized manner to target individuals of this country, to target critical voices, and especially to target minorities. And when I say that misinformation is being used in an organized manner, what I mean is that whenever there's a news event, and by news event, I mean something major that happens in the nation, whether it's Balakot, whether it's 2019 elections, whether it is something that's happening in Jamia or JNU, or farmers' protests, or or COVID, and especially the Tablighi Jamaat incident. All of these are news incidents where there's an inflection in the amount of attention that that national media gives to these incidents. And every time there is one such inflection, what we as an organization have noticed that there is an absolute organized form of production of disinformation. And the reason for that is that it has been realized over time. Alt News started sometime in 2017, February 2017. And at that point in time, we would probably debunk 5, 6, 7 stories a day. And these days, sometimes we end up debunking 8 to 10 stories a day. Not every day, but there are times when we would end up debunking 8 to 10 stories a day. And the reason for that is that various political parties in this country, in India, and especially the right-wing political party, BJP, has realized that disinformation is a very, very powerful tool to shape narratives. And anytime a popular narrative needs to be tweaked, what needs to be done is put out disinformation/misinformation in an organized manner, so that instead of ingesting facts, people ingest propaganda. And that is the role that over the past couple of years, past 3 years especially, that there is an increasing amount of mainstreaming of disinformation. And it does not end on social media. A lot of us think that misinformation and disinformation is a product of social media. But in case of India, the misinformation and disinformation also extends largely to mainstream media, where even corner case social media claims are put out on mainstream media, claiming that this is what is being claimed on social media. We have not verified, but it is being claimed on social media. As we grew up, or what we knew was it is. Sorry, I stay next to a train. As we grew up, what we know is that it was the job of the media to verify information and inform its users with verified information. But what has happened now is that media is the one which is increasingly propagating unverified information, unsourced information, anonymous information. And and along with that, along with media organizations, there are, especially during the time of COVID, there have been different companies who have used unverified claims to make lots of profit. People have claimed that there are drugs which can prevent COVID, and and these claims have been again put forward by mainstream media. For an example would be Patanjali's Coronel, and these sort of claims have been put forward by mainstream media, and people have spent money on these drugs en masse. So disinformation has also become a tool for financial success. That is, if you can successfully, using a propaganda machinery, convince people at large that something is true, even if it is not, then people will spend money to buy, whether it's a drug or a product. So as I said, I'm glad to be speaking on this forum because while we have been doing journalism as an organization, we've been approaching this issue of disinformation and misinformation as a journalistic body for about 5 years now. In Feb 2021 will be five. Feb 2022 will be five, and we've been approaching this issue as a journalistic body for 5 years now. But what we realize is that while journalism is a very important tool to raise awareness, and I think Alt News as an organization has played its part in raising awareness around the issue of misinformation and disinformation in India. Uh, but journalism is not a very good tool to alleviate a social issue. And here I'm categorically sort of terming the issue of misinformation and disinformation as a social issue, because it has become so widespread that every single household in this country is affected by misinformation and disinformation. And that is when one can term it as a social issue. And such a social issue cannot be alleviated just using journalism. Journalism is a great tool to raise awareness that, look, this is the issue. But as far as the alleviation of the issue, that is, what do we do to deal with the issue? What we really need is a new subject across India. The subject is called information literacy, and it is already being taught in multiple schools in Scandinavian countries like Finland, etc. And the results are there to see. For example, there have been studies which have been done of students from Finland versus students from the US, and in terms of how do they look at information, how much misinformation they fall for. And the Finnish students are way ahead of the American counterparts just because they have these dedicated courses in information literacy. And what is information literacy? Information literacy basically trains you from your formative ages, ages maybe even as young as 8, 9, and very often around 11, 12, where you are still forming your opinions, etc., where you're still trying to forming your basic skills. Information literacy creates this most basic skill that is needed in every individual, is how to look at information, how to differentiate between emotionally charged information versus something which is legitimate information. And this differentiation is very important because the primary tool that producers of misinformation and disinformation use is to create emotionally charged information. That is, every time you create a piece of disinformation, especially the caption that you see, you'll see a video, you'll see a photo, and then you'll see a caption. The caption is designed in a way to affect you at an emotional level, so that you get carried over with your emotions and probably press a forward button or internalize information. There are many countries who are now making policy changes in their, not many countries, a few countries are making policy changes in their educational curriculum to include this issue of information, include the subject of information literacy, so that the next generation of adults is not as susceptible to the generation of adults that we see now. And and uh, this is where India is lacking big time, because one can imagine, let's say, one can say that BJP is a political party because they have directly or indirectly gaining from misinformation, not interested in introducing a subject such as information literacy. But if you look at even the non-BJP states in India, and education in India is a state subject, even if you look at the non-BJP states in India, not a single state has introduced the subject of information literacy. Not a single state has done any kind of policy reforms to deal with the issue of information, misinformation, that is. So where we are today is that we have different political parties using disinformation in an organized manner, and as a society we have no way to counter it. Coming briefly, because I have only 10 minutes, so I just want to cover one last point. And coming briefly to the issue, we have spoken about the government and the political parties, but there is another stakeholder here, and that is the social media platforms such as Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And um, and uh, and because these platforms, they consider themselves as part of the solution, but as somebody who's working very closely with these platforms, I consider them as part of the problem. That is, they are doing a lot of harm because of their basic motive of extreme profiteering, where their business models um, are are aimed at making maximum profit without seeing what consequences these social media platforms are having on the society and human rights of especially the underprivileged. And we have seen activities on platforms like Facebook, which have even led to exodus, like the Rohingya exodus. Just in this very month, in the first week of this month, about 150 Rohingyas have sued Facebook for the exodus that happened in Myanmar, and the exodus happened because the military in Myanmar created several fake Facebook pages and put out hate speech and misinformation in organized manner. So the social media platforms are also a big, big problem in this whole equation, and they also need to be dealt with a lot of caution, and also they need to be made accountable. So this is the general issue of misinformation, disinformation in India. Thanks for listening to me.